Hello everyone, welcome to the State Library of South Australia. My name's Mark Gilbert, I'm a librarian here at the State Library and co-curator of the State Library's exhibition Sweet and Savoury, Menus from the Collections of the State Library, now on in our Treasures Wall. Some of you might have seen it already. If you haven't, please go and have a look after I finish speaking. The State Library acknowledges that the Adelaide region is the traditional land of the Kaurna people and we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. We also pay respects to the cultural authority of Aboriginal people visiting, living or working in the region who come from other areas of South Australia or Australia. Menus are kept as part of the State Library's Ephemera collection. Ephemera is material which is designed to be short-lived, such as posters, like this tourism poster from the 1930s, handbills, theatre programs, such as this one of the 1968 performance at the Adelaide Festival of Malena Dietrich, wine labels, very important to us all, postcards, such as this one from the 1940s. I think that must have been a postcard used all over the country and they just stamped at Kadina at the bottom there. Advertising materials, such as this one for Alaska ice cream from the 1950s. And even jam tin labels from Kingerley Preserving Company at Houghton. The thing about ephemera is that it's meant to be really material that's dispensable and thrown away, but we actually find that it reflects a lot about the cultural life in South Australia, not just the cultural life, but the business life. And it also shows just how designs have changed, graphic designs have changed as well. So people might come in here and you think that they're interested in wine because they're looking at wine labels, but they're actually more interested in looking at graphic design. From the plain to the ornate and from the simply functional to the beautiful, the State Library has many thousands of menus. Our exhibition upstairs looks at menus from our oldest, a dinner at Government House in 1867, through to those recently acquired from the South Australian restaurants, large and small, celebrating cuisines from around the world. The menu collection has many hidden stories showing not just how our eating and drinking tastes have changed, but as I say, also the changing tastes in graphic design. While we are here to speak about South Australian menus, we do have some menus from overseas and some from interstate, including these from the Hotel du Commerce in Bruges in Belgium. 1844 includes salmon with mayonnaise and filet of venison. And from 1856, Salmi de Canard, which is roast duck that is served in a white wine sauce. And this fan-shaped 1897 menu all include petit pois de français, which is peas braised with bacon, onion and lettuce. Beautiful menus. This menu is a little bit plainer than the ones from Belgium, but it is our oldest South Australian menu, and that's what we're here to speak about today, our South Australian menus. So our oldest South Australian menu is from the 31st of October 1867, when Prince Alfred, who was the second eldest son of Queen Victoria, landed in Australia. The first member of the British royal family to visit Australia, and he attracted huge crowds wherever he went. On his first night in the colony, he was the guest of honour at a dinner hosted by Governor Daly, which I think is actually more correctly pronounced Daly. Among the dishes the guests dined upon were Kremenskys or huîtres. There is going to be some very dodgy French pronunciation throughout this talk, but Kremenskys or huîtres, oysters rolled in thin shavings of bacon, dipped in batter and fried in hot lard. There's also timbali of macaroni, and of course, Albert pudding, named for Alfred's father. The next night, as you can see there in that artwork, a royal Fackelzug was held at Government House to celebrate the visit, which was a torchlight parade with songs by the Adelaide Liedertafel and Schrader's band. June 3rd, 1893, a luncheon was held at Torrens Park House for the Adelaide Hunt Club. Owned by Robert and Joanna Barr-Smith, who were known for their hosting of dinners and balls in the house and polo matches in the grounds. The handwritten menu includes mayonnaise of lobster, saddle of mutton, and a choice of chicken or pigeon pie. Now, guests were provided with plenty of sustenance to get them through the many toasts of this 1887 dinner held at Freemasons Hall. You can just see how many toasts there are there. It's very meat heavy, roast turkey, roast goose, roast duck, but with a wide range of sweets as well: plum pudding, apple pie, lemon jelly, champagne jelly, and English ales and porters. Like the dinner at Torrens House, it also included pigeon pie. The Golden Jubilee of Queen Victoria's accession, July 2nd, 1887 at the Town Hall, includes dressed Murray cod, saddle of mutton once again. There was a lot of mutton being eaten. There really was as you go through the menus. And of course, they provided Victoria pudding as one of the desserts, along with champagne jellies and meringues. Not surprisingly, there are a large number of toasts. This photo shows the town hall set up for a mayoral ball in 1895, so just a few years after the dinner for Queen Victoria. Now, being the State Library of South Australia, we cover the whole state, and so of course we have menus from outside of Adelaide, including a 1915 Christmas menu from Rayburn's Coffee Palace in Oodnadatta. It includes Melton Mowbray pork pies and the mysterious Oodnadatta Delight as a dessert. If anyone knows what Oodnadatta Delight is, please let me know afterwards. I'd be delighted to know. I don't know if I'd be delighted to eat it, but I'd be delighted to know what it was. It also includes oysters, devilled prawns and whitebait, somewhat surprisingly given just how far they were from the sea. Lots of toasts again, and space for autographs, which was quite a common thing in menus of this time, a space for autographs. Being a coffee palace, no alcohol was served. A coffee palace was sometimes known as a temperance hotel, and as the name suggests, was designed as a way to discourage drinking of alcohol, temperance being a very hot topic in South Australia at this time. In fact, 1915 is when they introduced 6 o'clock closing. After World War I, there were dinners given at various establishments for returning service personnel, including a peace dinner at the South Australian Hotel in 1919, with patriotic-sounding dishes such as potage britannica and English plum pudding with Australian sauce. We'll see a bit more of the South Australian Hotel a bit later. At the Aurora Hotel in 1920, a welcome dinner for returned soldiers who had worked at Miller Anderson's department store. Miller Anderson's was down in Hindley Street. And again, quite patriotic stuff there: roast beef, Yorkshire pudding, French beans, cutlets a la jardinière. And this was the Aurora Hotel around that time, on the southeast corner of Hindmarsh Square. And there was a very public controversy when it was demolished in the late 1980s, leading to ongoing heritage debates. Some of us are old enough to remember going to the Aurora. I'm one of those. I was very young at the time. To celebrate the first flight from London to Australia the previous year, in 1920 the Queen's School Old Scholars honoured their alumni Ross and Keith Smith. In the space for autographs we can see the signatures of the Smith brothers. Just up towards the top right, Ross Smith is there and Keith's just a little bit below him. The dinner was celebrated at the Grand Central Hotel, formerly on the corner of Rundle and Pulteney Street, where a car park now stands. That always gets a sigh when I put that picture up. Yeah, where the Hungry Jack's is on that corner. This photo shows the interior of the hotel around that time. I'm not sure what this dinner is for, because I can't see Ross or Keith in the photo, but there is an empty head table. So it's possible that it is from that night and we're just awaiting their arrival. Another dinner at the Grand Central Hotel in 1920 was for the visiting Prince of Wales, who came out from Britain as an acknowledgement of the service of Australians during World War I. Beautiful design, which we've used in our bookmarks, which you can see up around the Treasures Wall area. An obvious French influence in the dishes, and also includes what seems a very staple entree, and still is of course, of natural oysters. Riz de veau à la St. Cloud are sweetbreads that are pan-cooked with onions, tomatoes, mushrooms and beef broth. You'll also note that Australian wines are served with old-fashioned names such as claret, which we now know as Shiraz, of course. Now I'll have a double cut fritz and sauce roll, a London bun and an egg flip. Ellis Cafes were a popular chain of restaurants in the CBD of Adelaide, established by Edwin Ellis, who had a long career as a storekeeper and cafe owner. The Ellis Cafe organisation was formed about 1917 as bakers, pastry cooks, caterers, fruiterers and confectioners. The office and factory was at 120 Goodger Street, with a restaurant, Covent Garden, at 50 and later 68 King William Street. The Arcadia Cafe in Bowman's buildings on King William Street. Yes, and that building's no longer there either. And the Maple Leaf Cafe, 21 Rundle Street, now Mall. And two others in the Central Business District. The Covent Garden premises actually burned down in 1948 and unfortunately 5 people were killed in that fire, and maybe because of that only 4 years later the Ellis Cafes ceased trading. This 1946 menu shows that a double cut fritz roll was 7p, but you also had to pay 1 penny for sauce, which is essential, of course. I also point out, I'm glad to say that I don't have to explain what a double cut fritz roll is in this audience. And believe it or not, a friend of mine just told me as I was coming in here today, she was in Melbourne and just happened to be watching SBS, and Adam Liao, the chef, was demonstrating a recipe to make double cut rolls on his television show. Cornish pasties were 4p, and frankfurts and chips 1 shilling and 3p. A London bun with butter was 2p, but if you wanted an egg flip, that was 9p. Very popular, and as you can see, some of those dishes are very familiar to us now, that we'd get in cafes, and lunch bars around Adelaide. Now celebrating a job well done, a retirement dinner, 1948, an amusing and nicely designed menu for the retirement dinner held at John Martin's Dining Hall in July of that year for Miss Meta Smith, who was described as dyed-in-the-wool South Aussie, hard-working and wears well. Many of Adelaide's department stores, such as John Martin's and Cox Foy's, had dining areas where hungry shoppers and city workers could lunch. Johnny's dining hall was often used for functions such as balls and weddings and reunions, Christmas parties and fundraising events. This menu includes oyster soup and whiting mornay, as opposed to tuna mornay. From a 1940 magazine called the Pacific Island Monthly, I found that the ingredients for whiting mornay were medium-sized whiting fillets, white wine, lemon juice, minced onions, salt, cayenne pepper, milk, butter, cheese, and just general kitchen herbs, it said. Now, I know we were out quite far north in Oodnadatta earlier, but Radium Hill just seems a bit more remote even for me, even though it's on the road, off the road to Broken Hill. The opening of the Radium Hill uranium mine in 1954 was celebrated with a luncheon attended by the Governor-General. And there's the menu there: pineapple cocktail, consomme of chicken, turkey, ham and pork. But the one that I find a mystery, Longchamps in aspic. I know what aspic is, but Longchamps as a culinary item eludes me. Does anyone have a guess? I honestly don't know what the answer is. No. Yeah. I've gone through our various French dictionaries in the library and haven't been able to find it. There's obviously a brand of handbag, and there's a racing track in Paris. So I don't believe it's horse. I would hope not. But yes. Trains and boats and planes. In 1950, you could dine in comfort on the Trans-Australia Railway from Port Pirie to Kalgoorlie before changing trains to continue to Perth. The traditional menu includes roasts and prunes and custard for dessert. And you can buy novels, which is handy for a librarian like me if I'm caught short without a book. Operated by the Adelaide Steamship Company, the Manunda and the Manura were both built in Scotland and worked the Australian coastal trade. The passenger menu was also quite traditional, but the 1932 Manunda menu does include the option of nabob curry and rice. A very British style, I imagine. There's the Manura. The 1955 Manura menu has a Bengal curry and rice. I actually wonder if they are much different. And of course, the most famous South Australian ship of all, the Buffalo. This menu dates from the 1980s, before it became more of a family restaurant. And you can't complain about this airline food, although you might complain a little bit about the quality of my photography. As served on the first Qantas flight from Singapore to Adelaide in 1982, it includes chicken Singapura. And now we're off to the pub. The Richmond Hotel, this is a new building, opened in 1928 on the site of the old Plough and Harrow Hotel in Rundle Mall, of course at Rundle Street in those days. The lamb cutlets a la reform has the end 1 inch or so of the bone scraped clean from the lamb chop, scraped clean of meat, coated with egg and rolled in a mixture of breadcrumbs and finely chopped ham, cooked and presented with vegetables and a reform sauce, of which the ingredients included gherkin, hard-boiled egg white, mushrooms, pickled tongue and cooked truffle. I don't know if the Richmond still does that dish. The Oriental Hotel, 1949. The Oriental was on the southeast corner of Rundle Mall and Gawler Place. So you might recognise the building. Established as the Suffolk Inn in 1840, it had a number of other names during its life as a licensed premises, including the Saracen's Head and the Hamburg Hotel from 1847 to 1915, but the name was changed in 1915 due to anti-German sentiment during the First World War. Continued to trade under that name to 1966. The building survives. This building dates from 1925 and was built on the site of the Hamburg Hotel. This photo's 1964, as you can see, just when that big film Cleopatra was being released. And this is a 1949 menu that shows quite a nice pub menu, but the desserts are all using mock cream, and that's possibly to do with shortages in post-World War II Australia. The Vine Inn at Nurayutpa, of course, being the Barossa, has a bit of German influence. You can get sauerkraut with your steak and kidney pie. And spaghetti on toast for entree. St Vincent's Hotel at Glenelg. This circa 1960 wine list shows prices increasing. You can see where they've crossed out and added the updated price. So Veuve Clicquot up from 65 shillings to 90 shillings a bottle. Also imported creme de menthe was 3 shillings, but the Australian version was only 2 shillings. What struck me when I first saw this one was just the number of the selection of half bottles of wine, which is half bottles. You can still get them, of course, but not perhaps as common as they were here. And all sorts of liqueurs and brandies and cocktails. You get a Manhattan or a martini for 2 and 6. I just paid $25 for a martini. This one's the Pier Hotel at Glenelg, on the site where the Grand now stands. New Year's Eve, 1960. Amongst the steaks and chicken, there's a slight Asian influence, egg noodle soup and curry chicken with what they describe as true Oriental ingredients, including fried rice. They don't actually say what the true Oriental ingredients are. Now this is the South Australian Hotel, or the South as it was known. It was South Australia's grandest hotel and considered one of the grand hotels of Australia. It was first licensed in 1878, and around 1900 that magnificent 3-storey balcony was added. Famous guests included Anna Pavlova, Noel Coward, Catherine Hepburn, and there's various photos of the Beatles waving from those balcony in 1964 when they came here. Renowned for superb service and cuisine, it also had an autocratic head waiter, the Russian-born Louis Cotton, who was in complete control of the whole setup, refusing admittance to any male guest who was not wearing a tie, regardless of their social status. And he retired on New Year's Eve 1970 after 50 years of service. And that was about the time that the hotel was bought and knocked over. For those of you who don't know, it was across the road from Parliament House on North Terrace. On this 1970 menu, it included frog's legs. It cost you 80 cents for one frog leg, but $1.50 for a double. So I suppose you could look at it as a cost saving to buy 2. And snails à la mode de la baie that included shallots, carrots, white wine, vinegar, cream and egg yolks. In 1955, there was a Commonwealth Press Union dinner at the South Australian. It's a bit nondescript when you look at the front cover of this menu. And this, as I say, is from 1955, and this design screams 1950s for me. And as a result, we're using this image in a lot of our promotional material for the exhibition, including our bookmarks. It shows an early version of a wine trail. You can see there on the right, Clare Valley through the Barossa to Ranella and McLaren Vale. The Coupe Jamaica was coffee ice cream with rum, pineapple, crystallised coffee and chantilly cream. The Scotch Woodcock is a savoury dish consisting of creamy, lightly scrambled eggs served on toast that has been spread with anchovy paste or gentleman's relish. The 1950s and 60s saw a great emergence of dining clubs such as the Bacchus Club, which is a member of the Federation of Wine and Food Societies of Australia. The Barossa Valley branch had a dinner at the Anguston Hotel in 1960. Guests included the winemaker Colin Grant, famous for his development of the sparkling wine Barossa Pearl, which changed the face of wine drinking in Australia in the 1950s and 60s. Another guest included Australian diplomat Paul Maguire, who was responsible for the State Library's Maguire collection of maritime books. The Adelaide Beefsteak and Burgundy Club was formed in 1954 at the Imperial Hotel that was on the northeast corner of King William Street and Grenfell Street. And now there are many beefsteak and burgundy clubs throughout Australia and the world. Here we have menus from dinners in 1963 and 1966 that were held at the Highway Inn on Anzac Highway. Note the Spanish and German wines, as well as Australian, of course. We've got Wynn's Ramallo Brut Champagne, made in the traditional style at the Ramallo Cellars in McGill. I've seen some advertising for them and they proudly state that it's the most expensive Australian wine on the market. There's also at this dinner the German semi-sweet wine Labrador Milk and Tinto Santiago, which is a Tempranillo from Spain, and Rouge Holm Claret from the Coonawarra. And you'll see there on the dessert there's Chinese gooseberry bombe à la coeur, as shown by the famous TV chef of the time, Graham Kerr, who was known as the Galloping Gourmet. And on the inside of the 1963 club menu is this cartoon by renowned cartoonist Norm Mitchell that shows the food and wine from that particular club dinner in a fun way. You'll see just towards the middle top there's the grape trampolining department were given encouragement. Faster boys, they've drunk everything in the place. It also shows the drinks available, including daiquiris, Australian sherry, a Chianti, an Italian Chianti, and a Spanish champagne from the Costa Brava. The Highway Inn, whose modernist style development was opened in 1955, was a very popular place in the 1950s and 60s and into the 70s. Businesses and clubs would often host meals at the hotel, as these beautifully designed menus attest. Humorous names were sometimes given to the dishes at such events, such as the 5DN radio station Starve Din Din, More Din Than Dinner, menu from 1962 that includes the names of radio announcers of the time. I'm not sure if Venus Schnitzel sounds very tempting, but maybe the Fruit Slade, named for DJ Jim Slade, is a bit nicer. A lovely design from the 1961 New Year's Eve dinner. An Adelaide Woodpeckers Club Christmas dinner, 1966. I had to look up what the Woodpeckers were. First I kind of assumed it was from the Woodville Football Club, but no, it was a club for men involved in the timber industry who would meet monthly at the Highway. Mary Mackay's 50th birthday celebration menu is in the form of a hardback book. There it is, and you'll see that there's space cut out, possibly for a bottle. So I assume she must have been a big reader. And here's another beautiful design for a dinner held at the Highway as well. Wine Week Ladies Dinner, and this is a cloth napkin with a menu on it, 1958. As was the style of the time, the name of the women speakers was given under the husband's initials. So Mrs. T.W. Hardy was in fact Barbara Hardy, scientist and environmentalist who has given an annual grant for additions to the Thomas Hardy Wine Library, a special wine literature collection here at the State Library. And that one's on display. A lot of these are on display upstairs, and you'll get a bit more of an idea of the size of this one when you go up. La Femme Wine and Food Club, a club for women interested in good food and wine. Most of the dining clubs, I suppose you won't be surprised to know, were men's clubs. So women decided they wanted their own club, and so this particular club, there were branches across the state, but this one was down in the southeast. And on the menu is jellied orange consommé, a Caribbean dish, it turns out, with chicken stock, cloves, oranges, and of course gelatin. Now, some of Adelaide's best loved singers and musicians, such as Patsy Biscoe and Doug Ashdown, played at the Catacombs Coffee House in Romilly House at Hackney during the 1960s. Unfortunately, we don't know the name of the barista, but that coffee machine, the Gaggia, is just amazing. This photo is from 1964 and the menu is from 1969. So non-alcoholic Italian cocktails, cheese and pineapple toasted sandwich for 30 cents, and crumpets, but only in winter. And I started thinking about that. I seem to remember, and I could be wrong, that as a child, crumpets were only available in winter, at least in the shops, not all year round. Am I right in thinking that? Good. Ernest Restaurant, as you can see, 1962. Ernest Restaurant, opened in March 1961, was in the beautiful mid-century building at the River Torrens Weir, now occupied by the Red Ochre Grill. While Ernest was known for its fine dining and quality of food and service, occasionally not every guest was satisfied with what they were served. Particularly this anonymous diner who felt compelled to provide his or her own review of the 1962 Christmas menu. The person was also frustrated by the convoluted licensing laws at the time. So this was donated to us. We don't know by who, but the person must have been so irritated by the meal that they've actually written the review, stapled it in, and now it's in the State Library for posterity. So he or she writes, as the state licensing laws did not permit restaurants to serve drinks with meals, although hotels were prepared to do so, or permitted to do so, the meals served should have been superbly chosen, cooked and served, and ingenuity shown in the choice of beverages available, not only orange juice, dried ginger, or water. So just think about that. The hotels could serve wine and beer and whatever else, but the restaurants weren't allowed to. For the price per head of £3.10, it was the worst meal we have had, with the exception of the Hotel Elizabeth Christmas 1961. They didn't stop there. The review recorded each dish eaten, including the following. I won't read them all out, but the caviar was served cold toast triangles, unbuttered, with a side dish of crumb cream cheese. Iced consommé had jellied stock floating in warm, thin soup, skimmed from alleged minestrone. Christmas pudding was cold and soggy, large base of vanilla ice cream topped with whipped butter coloured cream garnished with the smallest strawberries available. And that last line said there were side dishes of fantail caramels, peanuts in shell and prunes. They weren't happy. I just came across that one day when I was looking in our menus collection and I thought, what gold is this? But I believe Ernest was very well regarded, so they must have been just having a very bad day that day, at least for this diner. This is a 1975 menu from the long-standing Salon Hut restaurant in Bank Street in the city. An early restaurant to offer South Asian cuisine, in Adelaide at least of course. The restaurant opened on 16th of September 1962 and operated for almost 40 years. And the owners of the Salon Hut actually donated their records to the library, including this great photograph of the inside of the restaurant in 1968. Now, what do you think the menu for the All Australia Timber Congress Dinner Dance menu would have been made out of? They made it out of wood. So yes, it's another great one I just literally came across and I thought that looks a bit odd, and then you can just tap your hand on it. Held at the Hotel Australia, that you can see the bottom right there in North Adelaide. And we've got those old-fashioned names for wines again, Moselle, Burgundy. And this is the hotel in 1969. So that building's still there, of course. Decker's Place on Melbourne Street at North Adelaide. The building was designed for entrepreneur Derek Jolly by architect Ian Hannaford and included an art space, Gamba recording studios and a highly regarded restaurant that was owned by Ballas Varga and operated from 1965 to 1985. Mr. Varga expanded the premises to include 2 party rooms and was the first in Australia to open a non-smoking dining area. This menu from 1969 includes proper Wiener Schnitzel, as opposed to chicken or beef or eggplant that is common now. And this photo shows, produced by the Tourism Bureau I should say, some very stylish diners taken in the courtyard of Decker's about 1974. Now we're off for a dinner and a show. Eddie White's at the Tivoli Hotel circa 1974. Cheer for the heroine and boo the villain over a 3-course meal. Born in 1931, musician Eddie White played his first gig at the tender age of 14. So it's no surprise that as a performer with such experience would stage vaudeville shows when he became a publican at the Tivoli Hotel in Pirie Street, and later at the Governor Hindmarch with his Star and Garter show. Actor Barry Eggington started the Old King's Music Hall in the King's Ballroom building on the corner of King William and Carrington Streets in 1967. An attempt to obtain a liquor licence at that time was initially refused, but he was introduced to Attorney General Don Dunstan, who was trying to amend South Australia's outdated licensing laws, and the licence was granted and the Old King's was open. It was a resounding success with productions such as Perils of a Drunkard's Daughter and Dora the Desirable Dishwasher. The humour might have been broad and the food quite traditional, but the fun was immense. Harndorf Inn, 1975. Not surprisingly at all, quite the German influence. Sauerbraten, Kassler chops, strudel and Black Forest cake. I looked up yesterday the menu and the Kassler is still on the menu, but the Black Forest cake is just taking a break from the menu currently. This is the Barn in McLaren Vale. Operated for 49 years until its closure in 2019. Established by artist David Dryden and winemaker David Hardy, the former coach house was converted into a popular restaurant. This menu is from 1997. As part of her 1977 tour of Australia, Queen Elizabeth II visited Kaiserstuhl's Chateau at Nuriootpa, where she and her party enjoyed lunch, a winery tour, and of course there were toasts. Some of you might recognise this building. The original home of the House of Chow opened in 1983 on Hutt Street. Another building that was demolished after a long heritage dispute, but the restaurant continues to trade in another building across the road from its previous site. This menu is from 1991. Abalone is still a specialty of the house today. Here's another fine example of my photographic skills. This is a small menu. It's about that size, I suppose, from Cafe Rigoni's in 1957 when it was in Moonta Street in the Central Market precinct. As you can see there, I would guess that the Zabellini listed here as dessert is perhaps what we know as Zabaglione, as the spellings and names changed. In 1979, the restaurant was bought by the Caon family and moved to Lee Street, where it traded for 40 years, and Rigoni's became famous for its modern Italian cuisine enjoyed over long business lunches. La Trattoria, this is circa 1980. After learning their trade at their father's restaurant, Marcelina's in Hindley Street, which was established in 1967, Andy and Chris Parisi opened La Trattoria on King William Street in 1975. Although the brothers only sold the business in the last year or so, La Trat continues to successfully offer their traditional Italian menu. And every time I go there, it's full. Now, during the 1960s and 70s, important reforms were made to the liquor licensing laws, with Don Dunstan playing a central role, first as Attorney General and later as Premier, of course. In 1967, a new restaurant licence was introduced, and on the 28th of September that year, 6 o'clock closing of hotel bars ended. So I mentioned earlier we started 6 o'clock closing in 1915, and it didn't end until 1967. During the 1960s and 70s, Mr Dunstan saw the potential of South Australia's climate and developed plans to boost tourism, especially aiming at international visitors. He wanted to showcase our wine industry, but he saw that improving our dining was so important to get international visitors to South Australia, including the revolutionary idea of outdoor eating. When I started to read into the convoluted changes to licensing laws and just the difficulty it was for someone to set up anything outdoors was just incredible to modern eyes, really. Government funding of Ayres House, which opened in June 1973, was a way to improve the standards of restaurant dining and to improve standards of service as well, as was the creation of a School of Food and Catering, now the internationally regarded Regency International Centre. Don was known to attend Ayres House quite regularly, and if he didn't like the food, he let them know about it. The menu's from 1979, and the photo of the restaurant is from 1974, shortly after it opened. Martin Haas at the College Arms on Curry Street, just where the TAFE building now is, was run by the School of Tourism and Hospitality, and the 1989 menu includes the trainees roast, which on this day was a breast of turkey. Chong Lu is considered one of the great innovators of world cuisine, a pioneer of East meets West cooking, opened Nettie's restaurant in 1975, where he fused European techniques with Asian ingredients. This menu is from 1986. Nettie's closed in 1988 and Chong began teaching at the School of Food and Catering at Regency Park, while sometimes doing guest spots, such as one at the Running Man in Hindley Street. And this we'll zoom into that photograph. You can see there he was cooking up a storm at the Running Man restaurant. But after that he returned to perhaps his most well-known spot, the Grange restaurant at the Hilton Hotel. So as mentioned, the Nettie's restaurant closed, but Nettie's 2 took over the site at 170 Hutt Street and was run by Kate Sparrow and Lee Tu Tai. It achieved national recognition in 1990 when it was judged the best restaurant in Australia by Gourmet Traveller magazine, and in 1994 the New York Times described the cuisine as simply elegant with the purest care for craftsmanship. The menu's changed every 7 weeks. You'll just see at the bottom there, this 1996 menu helpfully points out that smoking was not permitted until 10:30 p.m. Anne Oliver opened Mistress Augustine's in North Adelaide in 1981 and continued until 1992. Elaborate hand-drawn menus such as this Bastille Day menu in 1986 reflect the kaleidoscopic inspiration of cuisines from around the world. And I was kind of pleased to see that they also gave credit to staff front and back of house. This Mad Hatter's dinner at Mistress Augustine's in 1983, you are commanded by the Queen of Hearts to enjoy and reassured that the mushroom soup won't make you taller and won't make you smaller. These menus offer dishes such as bone marrow with grilled brains and liver in port sauce and whole rainbow trout in a sorrel and cream sauce. Anne Oliver won the 1989 Advertiser's Food and Wine Guide Chef of the Year. Possums was also in North Adelaide. These menus are from the early 1980s, run by Philip Searle and Barry Ross, who, as reported by Anne Oliver, were very supportive of her business at Mistress Augustine's in its transition from cafe to restaurant. Interestingly, on the back of one of the menus, there is a method of making the grilled brioche with raisin coulis and creme anglaise. I'm not sure if the customer had asked for the recipe or if it was the chef's recipe, but it would be worth giving a try. During the early 1990s, we start to see the introduction of Australian native ingredients. In 1995, the Red Ochre Grill was situated at Goodger Street before moving to its current location that once housed Ernest at the Torrens Weir. Andrew Filkey at the helm, it is known as the first restaurant to integrate native Australian ingredients into its fine dining menu. While this menu doesn't mention it, since it's for a special event dinner, the restaurant would serve kangaroo, crocodile and emu served with eggplant and potato galette. In 2021, I was fortunate to attend the Naku Adalu meeting, which means let's eat in Ghana, that celebrated the richness of First Nations food culture. It was held on the lawns of the South Australian Museum. Some of Australia's most noted Indigenous chefs prepared the courses. For each nation, Adnamata, Ghana, Nakuna, Narunga, Nadjeri and Narangeri, a hero ingredient was chosen to share its yata, place, tomatu, taste and percu story. And I will say that the crocodile in Murray cod broth was delicious. It was a great night, it really was. And of course I couldn't not include a menu from the Pheasant Farm. This one is from 1991. Pheasant Farm opened in the late 1970s. At first it had a set menu and you didn't get a choice. You had pate and pickles, roasted quail, and then pheasant, and then dessert. And that cost you $7.50. In 1991, the Pheasant Farm restaurant won the Remy Martin Cognac Australian Gourmet Traveller Restaurant of the Year award. In the library's photographic collection, we actually have a series of photographs taken by Simon Griffiths for Maggie Beer's 2001 cookbook, Maggie's Table, including this one of quail in vine leaves. As we wind up, we come once again to Don Dunstan, who was so instrumental, along with chefs such as Chong Lu, Anne Oliver, Philip Searle, Kath Carey, Kate Sparrow and Lu Tu Tai, in changing the dining scene in South Australia and making Adelaide a centre of food excellence. Post-political life, he even opened his own restaurant, Don's Table in Norwood. And he remains the only political leader to produce a cookbook, in which he included chapters on Malaysian and Indian cooking. Now, I'm just going to finish with a couple of excerpts from a couple of films that we have seen that you can see in your entirety up in the exhibition and also on the State Library's YouTube channel. I'll just get this one going. This is a silent film that shows people at the Hotel Elizabeth during the late 1950s, early 1960s. So, where that gentleman said it was the worst meal he'd ever had. But it's fantastic footage showing, you can just see Elizabeth at the time and how open it was up there. Scenes include people enjoying the beer garden and the dining area. If you look at the full film, you'll see men, and only men of course, in the front bar, as well as service at the drive-in bottle shop. This film was produced by Bradford Cotton Mills to promote the umbrellas and awnings in the outdoor areas. But as they go through it, you'll see the dining room and just, you know, how stylish it was. It was right up to the mark. You'll see the bar staff in their ties. Wait staff taking the schooners to the table. The whole thing goes for 6 or 7 minutes, I think, so it's well worth having a look. Obviously the lounge, because ladies were permitted in there, and children. The next little bit of footage, whoops, we'll go to the next slide, sorry. This one is not silent, it's just got some music, so I'll continue talking. A Taste of Adelaide, 1973. A couple take in the delights of Adelaide, and includes footage of the festival, the whole lot. This is only an excerpt. This one runs for about 10 minutes. The whole thing shows the festival theatre, recently opened of course, East End markets, but the focus is particularly on food and wine. And the film shows such establishments as the Old Lion Hotel in North Adelaide, Lord Kitchener's Indian Kitchen, which is what we're looking at now, Decker's, Ayres House, and the Old Mill at Harndorf. So we'll start to see Adelaide at night as they head off to Ayres House. And for those of you who know your Adelaide television history, the woman in this is Glynis Sigley, the wife of Ernie Sigley. And then they finish up at the old mill. So it was part of Dunstan's plan really to attract tourists from all over to our food and wine culture. I don't know if that's a traditional German song or not. But yes, you can see this and many other films from our collection on the State Library's YouTube channel. So that's it for